Welcome to Urthcast with your hosts, Ian and Shadow.
Welcome back, everyone.
I know it's been quite a while since we recorded an episode of Urthcast. We had a little bit of an issue getting the first episode uploaded and whatnot, so we just kind of wanted to wait until that was done. But here we are, second episode. Things should go smoothly.
Hopefully.
So today's topic of discussion, as some of you may see, is that today we are going to talk about the Enlightenment, or what would be an Enlightenment-esque equivalent on Earth with a U. So to clear up some confusion, I'm going to refer to IRL Earth as our Earth, and I'm going to refer to roleplay Earth as just Earth, just so that discussions can be nice, clear, and whatnot. But before we do begin this episode, as the new Minister of Broadcasting, I do want to do a shameless plug. I am currently recruiting. If you know how to edit audio, like basically just work with Craig, or Audacity, depending if like Craig breaks for some reason. But if you know how to work with that, we're hiring. If you want to make some designs for podcasts for the ministry, we're also hiring. I'm also hiring. If you want to be a host, if you want to be on it, or you want to be a part of it, let me know. Because I think I'm going to set up a Google form that I'll send you prior to the episode recording, so that, because I have to be compliant with international laws and everything, and there are laws in some countries where you have to have explicit consent to be recorded. So if you want to be involved in it, send me a DM. My Discord thingamabobbery. My Discord handle is SirShadow110, hashtag 3585. So you can send me a DM that way. And with that shameless plug out of the way, without further ado, Ian, would you like to start us off?
Yeah, I'll try, because even though we are talking about the Enlightenment today, the real discussion we had about this topic in the RP server was like so many months ago at this point.
Mm-hmm.
Like, it was last year, I think, we had this conversation about the Enlightenment.
I think we also had a revival of this conversation a while ago.
Probably, to be honest.
Considering how, like, dramatic the Enlightenment changed history on our Earth, I wouldn't be surprised that this is an ongoing conversation that would be happening.
Yeah, I wouldn't doubt it, definitely. But, basically, the thing in question here is that, last year, at some point, I don't remember exactly when, it doesn't really matter, but some point last year, one of the world-building questions, I'm pretty sure, was, something related to the Enlightenment. I don't remember what exactly. But that kind of sparked a whole conversation, and, people started asking, did the Enlightenment even happen on Earth?
And for the most part, the discussion was like, from what I remember from reading back in that conversation, because I don't think I was present at that time. For the most part, I thought a lot of people were saying, well, yeah, it did. Obviously, it had to have happened. But the more that I know when we had the revival of this conversation, I want to say like 6, 7, 8 weeks ago, from the time that this is being recorded, I remember I brought up the point that I don't know if the Enlightenment actually happened the way that the Enlightenment happened in our Earth. Because the original reason why I brought it up was that there's a lot of monarchies that still have and still hold substantial amounts of power in the present day. And one of the biggest things that came out of the Enlightenment was the era of parliamentarianism and the rise of what we now know as like our democratic republics, where we have parliaments and prime ministers and whatnot. And so I counter-argued that I don't know if we actually had like a worldwide enlightenment, or even if we had an enlightenment at all. Which, when we think about it, it's going to be really tricky to kind of look at, because there's a lot of like nuanced discussions to have about it too. Because like the Enlightenment also affected religion. You know, the idea of being atheist or not 100% full Christian started to become more of an acceptable thing in Europe post-Enlightenment, whereas before the Enlightenment, everything was dictated by religion. And now here we are in the present day on Earth. Pardon. And we have a lot of monarchies, we have highly religious nations, and we have multiple different religious institutions with significant followings all over Earth, that are still pretty religious. So where do we want to specifically like tackle first? Because this is like a huge discussion to have.
Yeah, this is gonna take a while to really try and discuss this in depth, but I don't know, maybe let's start with the democracy stuff, I think.
All right, I'll let you take it away for a while.
So I mean, kind of like you mentioned already, the Enlightenment on our Earth is really kind of what sparked modern, democracy and such, all that. Shadow basically already said this, so yada yada. But, on Earth, yeah, there's so many more monarchies and not that many constitutional monarchies where the monarch is just a figurehead. Like, there are constitutional monarchies on Earth, but with a lot of the constitutional monarchies, the monarchs do have actual power, and there are also a good few monarchies, like Asendavia itself, which are absolute monarchies.
And so was Algeria. Algeria was an absolute monarchy until 2020. Actually, a year ago at this point, where Algeria moved away from a complete absolute monarchy to more of kind of a split system between a constitutional monarchy and a parliament, which that's been a complicated mess to navigate. And I think that was actually one of the biggest reasons why I thought of this discussion, is because how would absolute monarchs be able to survive thousands of years where, on our Earth, monarchies pretty much died out because, there was a rising class of people that was able to gain money outside of the monarchy or outside of the state. And the idea of like serfdom didn't exist anymore. So who was the monarch responsible for, and where were the powers of the monarch, and how were they allowed to be monarchs without having a base, a check or a balance? As what is his name? Montesquieu. As Montesquieu said in one of his essays during that time. And when it comes to Algeria, the answer that I typically come up with is that Algeria embraced the idea of like an enlightened monarch, where just because there was a monarch at the head of the nation doesn't mean that it doesn't mean that they alone are the only ones who can make any sort of decisions. And so, as I've been trying to work through it recently, is there was probably a small advisory council that the king had that would be responsible for making certain decisions as long as the king willed the decisions. And that's basically how it would have been able to survive into the modern era. But obviously, like, it doesn't, you have Great Morcibishlia turning into a constitutional monarchy similar to that of Britain in 1917.
Yeah.
After the Great War. So how would Algeria survive that rise? Because, after 1917, we see a large number of nations following in the footsteps of the MBE, turning into constitutional monarchies, or even decreasing the power of monarchs. Or you have places like Peregrina, who have elections for their monarch, which is the most interesting dynamic I've ever seen.
Are you talking about the Prime Emperor stuff?
Yeah, that.
See, I don't think the Prime Emperor is actually a monarch. That's kind of misleading, the title. Now, I myself am not 100% sure on how Peregrinia's system works, because as far as I'm aware, it's actually pretty complicated, but there's the Empress.
Right.
And then beneath the Empress, there is the position of Prime Emperor, but it's not actually a monarch as far as I'm aware. Again, I'm not 100% certain on this. I would have to ask EM.
Oh yeah. The thing is that from what I've read and from what I've understood, like, that's kind of the position, is that the Prime Emperor is an elected monarchy position, but then there's an actual, like, other monarch that exists. I could be completely wrong. I mean, EM can correct us if we're wrong, but that's what I've at least interpreted their positions to be, because that's kind of what it also sounds like, and the way that some of his role plays seem to pan out is to point that in that direction. Since you're Asendavia and you have this huge imperial diet and whatnot, how do you kind of explain how Asendavia's absolute monarchy exists in the present day?
Well,
or have you not kind of, like, thought about that?
I've partially thought about it. I haven't thought about it, like, fully, but I have some ideas.
Okay.
So, like, yeah, so with the imperial diet, that does give some representation to the people. Like, the imperial diet itself isn't really that powerful, because, like, the king, or rather Kaiser, could easily override anything it does. Kaiser can dissolve it at will, so on and so forth, because, the Kaiser is an absolute monarch. But, you don't really kind of want to anger the people constantly by always overriding their decisions and such. And, like, I mean, to be honest, the imperial diet, like, only about a quarter of it is even elected by the people.
Right.
But, I mean, it's still representation for the people at the very least. So, I mean, Kaiser, maybe does some overriding here and there when necessary or such, but to be honest, you don't want to anger the people by doing it, like, every single time. So, Kaiser, even though he has the power and really is an absolute monarch, he lets the imperial diet go on, approves the most of the stuff that it sends forth.
So, like the Estates General, if King Louis XIV actually listened to the Estates General.
Yeah, pretty much, I guess.
Yeah, that was kind of what popped into my head, is that I feel like Asendavia basically did the exact opposite of France, where, they have the Imperial Diet, which sounds very similar to the Three Estates. Because you have the Church of Adamar, you have Adamarism represented, you have the nobility represented, and then you have the common folk represented. I would say pretty equally, but like, you know what I mean there.
Yeah.
It's kind of like an Estates General with a little bit more power, and basically the Kaiser listens to the Estates General.
Yeah, not to mention that the Kaisers for the past 100 years or so actually have been decently progressive in ways.
Whoa, a progressive Kaiser? Whoa.
Because, like, I'm trying to remember the exact date, but, like, in the early 1900s, I think it was either during the Great War or a bit after, it might have been the 1920s, but basically, interspecies marriage was, legalized during that point, which probably for the time would have been very radical, I imagine. Because, like, even though like Adamarism actually does preach equality of species, and that actually was largely followed in Asendavia, although not all the time, but for a good while, and most of the time, it was followed, equality of species. But even then, interspecies marriage would have been pretty radical, despite, the equality of species. And then, there were a few other reforms that I wrote about in a post, but then also, like, very recently, like, the beginning of this year, the Kaiser just completely legalized, basically everything LGBT, because, previously in Asendavia, even being LGBT was a crime, but, at, like, the beginning of January, that was completely legalized, so, it was legal to be LGBT now. You were even allowed to, the same thing allowed, LGBT people to, get married, so on and so forth, and also, because, yeah, on that note, polygamy does exist in Asendavia, it's a kind of tenet of Adamarism.
Right.
Previously, only men had been allowed to have multiple wives, but, during the kind of same LGBT reform, women were then, allowed to have multiple husbands and such.
Ah, yes, the discussion of polygamy.
Yeah.
How better to also talk in the Enlightenment. One of my major questions, is I wonder, like, obviously Concord had some sort of enlightenment that would have been equivalent to Urth, considering the fact that South Hills is a presidential system.
Yeah.
Which a presidential system is a direct byproduct of the Enlightenment. You kind of had before the Enlightenment on our Earth, we had the concept of confederacies. You could see with like the Netherlands in the 1600s. But there wasn't really a true like presidential system until America came around in 1776. Or, well, technically 1787, let's be real. Came around and they were like, oh, by the way, presidency! And then has been spreading presidencies all over the world to this day. But I wonder, I would want to talk to Tuva about that, because what would have happened in Concord, in South Hills, that would have led to an embracing of a democratic elected leader instead of the traditional monarchy of some sort. Did their monarchy fall out of grace? Did they have a King Louis XIV situation going on? Was there like a war of Spanish succession that happened at some point?
I don't think South Hills ever had a monarchy to begin with, actually.
Now that's interesting.
Because, I mean, South Hills only came about, if I remember rightly, in the 1700s. It's basically America.
Well,
it was a collection of different colonies.
Well, okay, there we go. We have a point. Okay, you have a point there. But still,
although unlike America, it was also a collection of different ethnicities.
that's quite a bit of a call out there. Anyways, but that still begs the question: if the Enlightenment wasn't such a radical idea, or if the Enlightenment actually would have been more of a fringe movement on Earth, then how did South Hills formulate? Because if we're saying that South Hills is, well, no. If South Hills is the Earth equivalent of America, then where did the idea of self-governance come from? And where did how did it formulate if there wasn't a huge movement pushing in Europe? Or, well, it would be Aurora, I think, actually.
Probably, to be honest.
Probably.
But, I mean, then again, the MBE... who knows, honestly?
That's kind of the major question to be had here, because it essentially would come from the MBE and Atharia, or, excuse me, Mors Cibicilia and Atharia, because those two would have been the largest colonizers in that time period.
I mean, Solovia was also a decent colonizer.
So, you're right. I was going to head down the list, too, but, like, Atharia and Mors Cibicilia are the two, like,
they're the two
big
major ones.
Right. And then you have, like, Solovia, Asendavia, too, during that time period? Question mark?
What, during the 1800s, 1700s, what?
Like 16, 17, 1800s?
Most of the Asendavian colonization kind of, it kind of started in the, well, hell, even the 1300s with Ifilclori, but I mean, there was, there was some Asendavian colonization during the 1600s. Like, probably, Carinthia was at least the beginnings of Carinthia was colonized in the 1500s, but I think it grew, like, the colony of Carinthia grew to what it is now in the 1600s. But yeah, Asendavia was colonizing during the 1600s.
Okay. I mean, I'm also going to have to grapple this question too, because I have a roleplay coming that involves Algeria colonizing, like, this tiny little area of Concord, mainland Concord.
Oh yeah, that area.
That tiny, it's a small area. Like, I don't see how it would affect things too much, but it's still a question that I'm going to have to grapple with, because how would that stay within Algeria and not break away? I have a few ideas on how it happens, but
especially considering South Hills is basically Monroe Doctrine.
Well, see, here's the other thing that, especially when it comes to the Monroe Doctrine, I think we do need to discuss is, Algeria's colony would predate the Monroe Doctrine, and the Monroe Doctrine would only happen after the formation of South Hills. So
South Hills, according to the wiki at least, was formed in like 1760, but at the same time, South Hills is kind of almost more militant than America in a way when it comes to its own continent.
Right. Again, I guess that's going to be a question that's going to have to be grappled with and worked with.
Yeah.
Especially with Tuva, since, like, there would be a direct border there. But again, if if the Okari settlement predates the Monroe Doctrine and whatnot, there's a part of me that would personally say that it would be protected by the Monroe Doctrine, because
I don't know, because Ladienburg was a colony before South Hills was formed, but I think I remember in discussions about the kind of South Hills Monroe Doctrine. I think it's named something else, but I'm just going to continue calling it the South Hills Monroe Doctrine because I can't remember what it's called in character.
And that's essentially what it is, let's be real.
Yeah.
Actually, I thought it was in character still called Monroe.
Was it? I thought it was named differently. Let me check.
Again, that's a question for Tuva to answer. But
I know it doesn't. Shadow.
So I went to go change the channel I was looking at, and I accidentally clicked the voice channel.
Good job.
Yeah,
actually, looking through the search bar though, it actually, as far as I know, doesn't look like Tuva's actually named it properly yet.
Okay. I think he was potentially thinking that he was going to call it the Monroe Doctrine. Pardon me. I think he was going to have some dude named Monroe be important at some point.
Yeah. To be honest, I wouldn't really mind that much.
Yeah. But digressing from that conversation, digressing back from our tangent back to the main topic at hand, it's still interesting because especially the I want to say the start of decolonization. Well, no, not even. It wouldn't be the start of decolonization. The idea that there's sovereignty to be had in like colonies, or sovereignty to be had in basically a confederacy, would be a byproduct of this Enlightenment. So again, how would I wonder how the Enlightenment would look in the South Hills colonies. And I wonder if there are other nations on Earth that we only talk about the major ones because those are the ones we're most familiar with. But I wonder if nations like what's a good nation to think of, like Peregrina or New Laganes. Like, I wonder what Enlightenment they had, or what about the entirety of Gondwana? Would Gondwana have had their own sort of Enlightenment going on?
I mean, to be honest, I think New Laganes was already pretty enlightened to begin with.
Well, yeah, I mean, you have a point there.
Yeah, considering Princeism.
Very enlightened there. Again, anytime I have a discussion about the Enlightenment, it's always an enlightening conversation.
Bad joke.
Bad joke, but joke worked nonetheless.
It did.
Another side idea is I wonder if the Enlightenment was like the Renaissance, where it was different for every single nation.
That's totally possible.
Because, when we talk about the Renaissance, there are only two main... There's, the overarching Renaissance that we talk about, which starts in Italy and then, spreads through Europe, and we don't talk about the rest of it. And then you have the English of Renaissance. So I wonder if something similar would be happening here, where Aurora has their own Enlightenment, Concord has its own Enlightenment, Arcturia. Actually, when it comes to Arcturia, I think actually North Arcturia would probably have one of its own, and then Southern Arcturia. Because there's a major cultural difference between Northern and Southern.
There's a radical difference between North and South Arcturia.
So I wonder if North Arcturia has their own Enlightenment, South Arcturia has their own Enlightenment. Bellisteria probably has their own Enlightenment.
Hell, I wouldn't be surprised if there were multiple in Bellisteria as well.
Actually, considering with how large Bellisteria is, there's probably multiple different Enlightenments.
Yeah, I wouldn't doubt it.
um, and another, and actually, if we're talking about the Enlightenment, there's only one continent we need to talk about when it comes to the idea of the Enlightenment, because it would be the most funniest thing to see happen. I wonder how it looks on Novaris.
Oh dear God, Novaris, the dumpster fire continent.
There's no good, because if we're saying that the Enlightenment is like the Renaissance, and if we're going to assume that Novaris probably would have had its own Enlightenment, similar to that of the Renaissance, I wonder how it would look on Novaris. Because
That's a very good question, honestly.
Because you would have Archilarius and Tretrid, first of all, having their own enlightenment, which probably are going to be which is probably going to be very much like anti whoever they are rhetoric that would come from that.
Well, I don't think Archilarius and Tretrid really actually had a hatred for each other at that point yet.
Yet it could be the start of the hatred, though.
As far as I'm aware, the hatred mostly began around the Great War, I think.
Oh. Boo. Okay.
Although a lot of the modern tensions really began with the, Archean Civil War in the early 2000s.
Oh yeah, no, that's definitely the start of like the modern tensions between the two of them.
Definitely.
But then there's then you have nations like Aponivia in the middle of the continent, where I wonder what their enlightenment would have looked like also. Considering their topography and everything, like how, they're pretty much split off from the rest of Novaris, so how would that look?
Yeah, because I think they were still a Tretridian colony at that point. Well, at least Norden Punto was. I think Lycia was. I'm not sure about all the shit in the middle. Inu Pasenos on the southern coast, which is, I don't think it's part of Aponivia on the map yet, but it is part of Aponivia. At that time, it was an Asendavian colony.
Ooh! Awesome. Look at Asendavia. Because realistically, it probably, now that we're actually discussing it, I wonder if it actually would be like a Renaissance-esque kind of thing, where every continent or every, not sphere, but like Northern Arcturia, Southern Arcturia, like groups, would have their own enlightenments separate from each other. I also, and continuing on with this discussion, another thing that also is a byproduct of the Enlightenment and pretty out there as words. Another like byproduct of the Enlightenment that's important to also talk about is how it affected religion, because on our Earth, the Enlightenment had a direct negative look on the Catholic Church, the Christian Church in general, because you had the rise of like the deist movement, which was pretty much God was a watchmaker god. God made the world, and that was it. And walked away. You also had and also as a direct kind of a direct byproduct of the Enlightenment, but happens, in the 1800s, much later. You also have the Second Great Awakening in America. So, I wonder how that would look on Earth too. Like, how did the Church survive in the different Enlightenments?
Yeah, I do think we need to keep in mind, because with Earth, religion is a lot more kind of scattered. Like, there's multiple major world religions, because, like, yeah, for most of our Earth's history, major religion was, Christianity, but obviously you also can't forget to mention Islam, which was,
Right.
But yeah, when we talk about the Enlightenment, most of the stuff is, we're just talking about the Christian countries and such. But, with Earth, we got Atomism, we got Theorism, we got Reform Theorism, aka Veyrism, Vercoism, which was in Solovia, just Ossatruth, just so many different major world religions. And of course, Kunseism, which was extremely progressive already.
But yeah, I mean, even so, like, even if we have to say that there are multiple different world religions, it would still be fair to say that there would be some discussion in these Enlightenment circles about religion and how religion.
Yeah, definitely.
And unfortunately, there would not be able to have like a blanket a blanket movement where on Earth we kind of had the Christian church and then the splinters from that because of the Enlightenment, but there'd still probably be splinters from churches and churches on Earth.
Oh yeah, I wouldn't doubt it.
I mean, I'm in discussions with somebody right now to have a breakaway church from the Church of Zathos, where
Who, if I may ask, or is that being kept secret right now?
Well, considering the fact that we had a conversation in a public channel about it, I don't think it's really private right now, but with Keon actually, for one of his nations. Which is really interesting because it's forcing me to actually think about what Zathosism is and what it would evolve around. But the topic of the Enlightenment brings up this very interesting topic because the Enlightenment could have caused the splinter church, where the church split into two, and Keon has his branch and I have my branch. It could be, the individual enlightenments could have also caused the rise of Therism and then a reformed Therism, which I don't think that actually happened because I think the reformed Therism is separate from it, but could have happened. I mean,
yeah, I think reformed Therism existed a while before, like at least hundreds of years before the Enlightenment. I don't know. I mean, Dylan is in the he is listening right now, so
he is listening. So we could probe him real fast about this kind of questions. I'll get my poker out. Oh, look at that! He might put it in line with the Enlightenment. Look at that. But hold on, let me get my poker out and let me poke Dylan about this real quickly. Ugh. Oh wait, that's my screen. I can't poke him through the screen. Damn it. But yeah, no, that is that is fair to think about because especially since Therism would be such a large, or since Therism is a large religion, especially would be coming from like more Stabitia and that continent where there's a lot of people, it would not be surprising that a reformed Therism branch would be formed through an Enlightenment process of some sort.
Yeah.
And, for me personally, when it comes to how would the Church of Zathos essentially survive the Enlightenment pretty much intact? The answer to that question is kind of a devolved church system. Which sounds weird because there's an archbishop, but I'm about to explain. So a devolved church system would be where there's like a church, where there's the Church of Zathos of Algeria. Yeah. Actually, I have it canonically established right now that there's a Church of Zathos of Algeria and a Church of Zathos. There you go, of Bellisteria. And the two churches are still in full communion with each other, as the Auxilian Church is the head church, the original church. There's questions to be had that maybe to survive it, they kind of devolved the churches to allow the church to address the individual needs of the nation instead of having a centralized system like the Vatican.
Yeah. So kind of like Eastern Orthodoxy. That's what I'm thinking. It's like
Sort of like East. Sorry, I just died. Kind of a mix between like the Eastern Orthodoxy, where you have different churches, like the Greek Church, the Russian Church, and the Ukrainian Church, but it actually invests power in the what's the title?
Of the Eastern Orthodox?
Yeah, the patriarch.
Ecumenical patriarch?
Yeah, the ecumenical patriarch. Where the ecumenical patriarch is more of like the Pope, so you have more of like this Vatican, where you have more of like the Catholic Church Vatican system mixed with the Eastern Orthodoxy.
Okay, so in terms of
devolution,
it's kind of like an in-between between Catholicism and Eastern Orthodoxy?
Correct.
Okay, I see.
Because like in early versions, or in the early church, it would be almost very similar to the Eastern Orthodoxy, where the Auxilian Church would own, well, at the time it would be split up between multiple different kingdoms in Algeria, but that the seat that is in the Eternatus Island serves as the primus. What is it? Primus inter opus? Hold on, I gotta find the term. But basically, it means first among equals.
Yeah, like the ecumenical patriarch.
Yeah, primus inter pares, which is what the Eastern Orthodoxy has when it comes to the ecumenical patriarch. But over time, it would be more centralized because Algeria would be centralizing, and there would be that. And then, kind of post-Enlightenment, it would kind of go to an in-between system where we still have the Archbishop, who is the head of the church, who sits in the Eternatus Island, but each of the high elders of the church would be held almost as equals in their own church. They could not change doctrine, as doctrine would have to be decided by the head, by the Archbishop and the whatever college I'm going to call it. I think I'm just going to call it the College of Elders. Okay. But they could address individual needs in the church on their own level.
Okay, yeah.
How would Adamar, since you created Adamarism, how would Adamarism survive an Enlightenment in some respect?
Well, Adamarism is basically like Christianity, at least in the sense that it's got so many different branches and shit. And
right.
So basically, the main branch, the Church of Adamar, is essentially Catholicism. It's basically the Adamarist equivalent of Catholicism. It's got the High Patriarch in Stromharad,
right,
which is basically like the Pope, and Church of Adamar is practiced worldwide. It's Catholicism basically, and then you've got a few other branches in Asendavia, like the Church of Saint Cell, which I haven't really fleshed that one out, but I've kind of decided that it works a bit more like Eastern Orthodoxy, where it's a lot more decentralized,
Right. And that makes sense. I mean, that's actually kind of really cool.
And then, of course, there's also Pravdeism, which is art's creation, where they essentially see the leader of Ifilclori as being Adamar reincarnated.
Oh, yeah.
That's a very radical form of Adamarism.
That is...
And then you've got oppositionary Adamarism in Vistarland, which is kind of like at least as far as I'm aware, it's kind of like Protestantism.
Mm-hmm.
And then you got also, again in Vistarlade, Virist Adamerism, which is kind of more in a sense of how it operates, I think, kind of like a smaller Church of Saint Cell, as far as I'm aware. I'm not 100% certain on how Virus Adamerism operates. I'd have to ask Sock Dill to be specific for the viewers, not Dylan.
Not Imperial Dylan. Socialist Dylan. But yeah, I mean, this is this is also an interesting discussion to have because, I really should not have turned down my fan. It is so hot in here again. Irregardless, we also have the,
Ooh, okay, so Dylan, Sockdale just responded. So he says
Yeah.
Verism is he says it's like a less Protestant Anglicanism.
I'm sorry, I have to laugh because I thought Anglicanism was already pretty, not Protestant. But,
Pretty much.
that's a good comparison, to be honest. A less Protestant Anglicanism. That's actually a really good, I like that. That's good. Kind of have that image in my head now, and it's really weird. I don't know what my point was. Do you know what my point was?
Well, the original point was kind of like how would have Adamerism been affected by the Enlightenment, and I don't think I actually really properly answered that.
No, because I don't know, and with the way that you're describing it, I don't know if there is really a proper response you can make to it.
Because Adamerism would have been affected by an Enlightenment sort of thing, probably some of these branches. Maybe the Vistari ones came about earlier, more like at least 1300s, I think. But
right,
probably some Adamerist branches that I haven't described, but I know that would exist, probably would have come about as a result of the Enlightenment. It's just a matter of me at least having to name them and maybe describe them a bit, which I haven't done yet.
fair point. That's actually really good. I like that. And one of the questions, since we're talking about religion and enlightenment and whatnot, question that has been asked in the chat by Imperial Dylan, is how would music affect religion, which is also kind of related to.
Actually, I think the question is more just how music has a cultural impact in general.
Well, right, but I'm looking at the second part of it, which talks, affects religion.
Oh yeah, okay, the second part. Yeah, I only read the first part.
Yeah, I'm not gonna. The first question is a world building question that we can discuss. The second part is something
it looks like Dylan has stolen the ocarina.
No, he's not allowed to. I'm stealing it back. I'm stealing it. Mine. Well. All right.
I don't remember you saying about the.
No, I didn't.
Dylan. I'm kind of addressing Dylan here.
Oh, that's fair.
Okay, so Sockdill says oppositionary Adamerism was the 1700s. So yeah, oppositionary Adamerism, post-Enlightenment, yeah.
Ooh, post-Enlightenment, let's go. But since we're talking about Enlightenment and religion and how those intersect, music is also something that also would be affected by the Enlightenment, because there's a chain. Please forgive me. I have indulge my I know too much about a lot of different things brain for a moment. In the Catholic Church, there are a lot of hymns that get changed post-Enlightenment. There are a lot of pardon. There are a lot of hymns in the Catholic Church and in the Christian world in general, that their focus in the hymns changed from the divinity of God and how God is the stem of all things, and kind of more pushes this narrative of just giving praise to God for his creation. A good example of this is the what's the hymn called? Make me a channel of your peace, which the whole point, which originally it was set up, or the original hymn was just a prayer, which is based off of the prayer of Saint Francis. But post Enlightenment, it became more of something that just kind of was kind of something you would sing praise about for God and whatnot, which you would have, which would lead to like the 4 major different kinds of like prayers and hymns, which would be like your sorrowful, your thanksgiving, your praise, and your, forget what the 4th word is. But you have like those kind of 4. That is a phone call. Kind of 4 different like realms that they inhabit.
All right, then.
And for Zathos, I don't think the Enlightenment will actually affect the music so much, because Zathosi is like I'm going back and revising a couple of things. Zathosi is a monotheistic polytheistic religion. It sounds contradictory, but I'm about to explain. Basically, the point is that, like, there's the creator deity, Zathos.
Yeah.
But then there's the pantheon of gods and goddesses who exhibit characteristics of whom the creator would have been, kind of inhabiting the creator's spirit.
So they're kind of like aspects of the creator?
Yes.
In a way?
In some respects, yes.
Okay.
And then there would be like saints, but like that's a whole other story.
Yeah, yeah.
But that's kind of how that's developing. I mean, I don't know if it's so much like strictly monotheistic, polytheistic, but I think it's kind of like, you know, you have like Zeus, who's like the head god, or you have Jupiter, who's the head Roman god.
Yeah, yeah.
Kind of how that is for Zathosi, where Zathos is the head god, and all of the gods and goddesses are either related to or an aspect of Zathos.
I would lean to almost more just calling that almost just straight up polytheism, not really monotheistic polytheism. Unless like Zathos basically receives all of the attention, I would just call that polytheism, I think.
All right, time to give all the attention to Zathos. Ignore all those other people. My God, it's so hot in this room now. I can like just to give you an idea of how hot it is. I got a 40-ounce icy while I was out doing errands with my mom. The bottom quarter of my thing. Now, this entire thing was full of icy when we started. The bottom quarter of this thing is full of liquid right now. And we have not been doing this for that long.
Yeah, only like a little bit less than an hour.
Mm-hmm. And I already have a quarter of this thing melted. That is how hot it is in here. So I do forgive anybody who's listening to this later and I hear like a background like humming noise. It is literally so that I don't sweat to death right now because it's just so ungodly hot.
And to be honest, I've had my AC going on for like multiple days at this point. My room is cold.
I love the cold. Neither here nor there. That was not our discussion, but you know what?
At least either way, we're also not in the Pacific Northwest.
To anybody who lives in the Pacific Northwest, you know, Zathos, bless your soul. I don't know who you pissed off to make it 112 in in Oregon. But man, oh man.
It reached 121 in Canada. Yeah, just let that sink in. 121 fucking degrees.
In Canada.
Yeah.
I'm going to address this right now, Dylan. Just because you have the ocarina doesn't mean that that instrument didn't like make its way over to Algeria. So the ocarina can still be used. Haha! I found loophole. Ha ha ha!
Also, and just a side note for our inferior metric friends, 121 Fahrenheit is like 49.5 Celsius.
I don't want to think about the fact that they basically...
Yeah, that's right, Norgs. Oh, fuck.
That is the appropriate reaction to have.
Yeah, that is halfway to fucking boiling.
There are already like 14... I thought I saw somewhere where it was like either like 14 or 15 people reported dead because of the heat wave in the Pacific
thought it was
Northwest.
more. Cause
I saw like 14, 15.
I'm seeing over 130.
Oh well, yeah. Okay. I might have seen something outdated, to be honest. I haven't checked to see what like the today's statistics.
Either way, as much as I like this part of the conversation, I do think we should probably
Reach
get back to
back.
the topic. Yeah.
Look, you're telling two people to talk to each other. Tangents are gonna happen.
Obviously.
Obviously.
I mean, do we just want to take questions from the audience at this point?
Yeah, you know, why don't we oh jeez. There's sweat all over the place. Those who are listening. Well, so first of all, before we start into question time, question time. Wow, I feel like a teacher right here. No, I'm kidding. But for those of you who are listening, later on YouTube, if you have any questions that you want answered, leave them in the comments. We gladly will look over those questions and discuss them. Oh my god, Sockdill. No! Well,
You
yes,
can't
we
go
also
to the
know-
bathroom, Sockdill. You are forbidden from the bathroom.
I dismiss you, not the bell. Anyways, if you're listening later on the Yup Tubs, or on TEP TV, leave questions in the comments. We will gladly answer them in our next episode. We'll answer them in the next episode. But for now, for those of you who are currently listening, got any questions you would like us to talk about or answer?
If you got any questions, just write them down quickly down here in VC Vibes. Preferably try to write quickly because awkward silences are very awkward.
Look, my entire life is just one full awkward silence. It does
That's
not have
rude.
to be related to the current topic.
Yeah, it doesn't have to be related to the current topic. Just ask anything, really.
If you want it to be if you want it to be related, no problem.
Most insane newscaster on Earth.
I'm going to forbid the answer of Bylong, because he's a bot. Let's be real, it's a bot. He's a bot.
Well, yeah, what do we mean by insane here? Do we mean like IC or OOC?
Yeah, that's a good question. Ooh,
Okay, so
IC.
Meeg says IC. That's a good question.
The Grand Emperor is pretty insane.
Well, is he a newscaster?
Have you seen how many times he's hacked into the Ant news broadcast?
Oh yeah, fair point.
I think that's a valid answer.
Yeah, okay.
I think another insane one is kind of the Kirlothian newscast.
Oh yeah, definitely.
Oh wait!
Oh, in the Army of Progress. Yeah, definitely. I forgot about the Army of Progress.
They haven't done much recently, so it was kind of easy.
Yeah, they really haven't.
No offense, Stockdale. I'm sorry.
But yeah, ask more questions. Oh yeah, true, Shannon.
I don't know if Shannon's really that crazy, though.
Well, I mean, she is Megarian, so...
I mean, okay. If we're gonna talk about Megaria is basically culturally about 1,000 years before us right now. Let's be real.
Pretty much.
They just ended serfdom.
Pretty much. Oh, and Norgs has asked a question. Since I've always viewed Norgsveldet to be, or trying to be an enlightenment monarchical tradition and model for other nations, basically as constitutional monarchies. So he's wondering how likely you think other continents would basically be influenced by Norgsveldet's model of monarchy.
Ah! Well, that brings us back to the original Enlightenment question.
Yeah.
And it also depends on if the Enlightenment was... It depends... Well, we're not even going to talk about the colonial and imperialism question yet, because that's a whole other question in of itself. The first point is, it depends on how the Enlightenment looks for each nation. Because if we're going to agree, or if we're going to assume, have a baseline, that the Enlightenment is Renaissance-esque, where it happens in each individual nation, and each individual nation has their own enlightenment, then an idea of an overreaching enlightened monarch would probably be non-existent, because it would only be in the Norgsveltian enlightenment ideal, and not like, I don't know, the Asendavian, or the Karikian, or the what's a funny nation I can pull out real fast? In the Rhodenian enlightenment. But if we're gonna go more colonial, if we're gonna kind of ask this question in a colonial and imperialism sense, then all of the nations that Norgsveldet colonized, Miramah, I think I said that wrong.
No, Miramah is right.
Miramah, that's the only one I can think of. Oops, that's the only one I can think of.
Continue asking questions, people, while we talk. We'll get to the questions as we go. Oh, okay. Sockdale just asked another question. Do we think the current question is answered enough, or?
Do you think the difference to the Enlightenment I justify the existence of Theo-socialism and ideology which IRL parallels died out during the pre-Enlightenment era? See, the problem with that is that that's more of a political question. Like, and again, it stems to, well, what does the Enlightenment in that nation looks like? If the Enlightenment in that nation allows for Theo-socialism to exist and survive, then it might as well, it could justify the existence. But I do think, like, overall, due to the difference of the Enlightenment, I think that Theo-socialism could exist. I think.
And now Dylan has asked a question. Do you like chicken nuggets, Ian? Yes, I do.
Good, you better like it, otherwise I was going to kick you out.
Dylan has asked another one. What do you think of Meow Meow Hiss?
The hell is Meow Meow Miss?
Okay, so this is kind of an inside joke. So, Meow Meow Hiss, back in late 2016, early 2017, was a nation on the southern coast of Aurora. Do you know where Rosalica is?
Yeah.
It's, pretty much there. Meow Meow Hiss was pretty much there, and, it was quite literally a nation that was ruled by cats. And I'm not talking about the species feline. I'm talking about domestic House cats.
Okay. The funny part to this is I am currently reading the news, the whatever it is that Dylan linked. Oh.
Yeah, so Meow Meow Hiss was basically in the area of where Valerica and Rosalica is.
Okay. I mean, Soxil, it's not so much that we've spiraled off topic. It's not so much that we spiraled off topic. Like, this is just general question time / general banter era.
And Sammy has asked, why does Bellisteria smell so much?
I mean, they're bears. It wouldn't be racist. It's species.
Speciesism.
There we go, that word. It's speciesist, not racist. Second of all, Bellistrians smell because they have noses.
Tritian chemical warfare. It smells bad.
Smell because their fur is soaking up all that Agent Orange.
Oh,
I know.
okay. And
actually, so there was a question up by Magaria, my favorite type of cheese. Well, my favorite type of cheese is cheddar because it's the one that doesn't affect my lactose intolerance as much.
And I'll answer that one as well. I like pretty much any kind of cheese, but I think I might have to go with smoked Gouda.
Ooh, Gouda is a really good cheese.
And now, Norgs has asked an actual question.
Good!
So, do you think nationalism is far less than... Basically, is nationalism less prevalent than in real life, or... I'm trying to figure out exactly what he's asking, because I'm sorry, Norgs, but you worded that kind of weirdly.
The example that he's providing is a lot of Arab nationalism and nationalism in other developing Muslim nations was influenced by nationalism in
Ataturk, father of modern Turkey.
I mean, on the topic of nationalism, I think that actually, I don't know how to answer this question.
Could you maybe word it a bit clearer, Norgs?
Yeah, because I'm
not sure how to properly answer it the way it's worded currently.
I mean, yes, Atharian nationalism exists, but Atharian nationalism is going to look different than the nationalism that Norgs is trying to describe.
Okay, if we're going to talk about systemic male sexism, we have to talk about Alliantia.
The country where no men exist.
Yeah, so for our viewers who haven't heard of Alliantia before, they are well, first of all, they don't get castrated, Dylan, but some of them essentially do. I'll explain. So Alliantia is a matriarchal nation, which in and of itself isn't necessarily a bad thing. However, Alliantia men are A, second-class citizens, B, have been forced to become femboys, or C, have so basically men are second-class citizens, and basically they're either force femboyized or basically forced to become trans women in order to not be second-class citizens anymore. And basically for the men who don't become trans women, those men have to basically donate their sperm to a sperm bank every week, or I think it was actually twice every week.
Mm-hmm. They basically have to go. It's basically going to the doctor every two or three times a week.
I don't think it was 3 times a week. I think it was just twice a week. Yeah, I'm pretty sure it was just twice a week.
I think
Alliantia is
yeah.
Alliantia is just crazy. Not to mention that it's got 60 million people and most of the country is just like pure tundra.
Okay, do you think nationalism is less prevalent or developed later than IRL?
Yeah, I see what
I
George
see.
was asking.
Okay.
I had a feeling that was what he was going for in the initial question, but yeah, he's worded it much better now.
I think it's actually twofold. I think that I actually think nationalism is more prevalent. At least in today's today's Earth society. But I also think that our idea of nationalism was probably developed sooner than IRL. Mainly because like you've had the slow kind of decolonization of Morsavishlia, which could be attributed to a rise in nationalism in Morsavishlia. You have the complete shattering of Atharia, meaning to just Atharian nationalism in general. You had extreme Bellistrian nationalism, which came to a head in when they decided to off the king of Algeria. So I think that the idea of nationalism, I think it definitely developed differently than our idea of nationalism, but also B, I think it's contributed to why decolonization is happening or happened slower than IRL. I don't know. What do you think, Ian?
I think you've pretty much got it, because like, at least when it comes to nationalism in Asendavia, because like for reference, Asendavia kind of unified properly in the mid 1200s, or yeah, mid to late 1200s, because during the like beginning of the 1100s, Asendavia was basically kind of just the east coast of what is now modern Asendavia, and like earlier than that, it had somewhat expanded westward and such, but like during the 1100s to 1200s, there was a real like expansion west into the other ethnically Gliotchian principalities and such that were west of Asendavia. And so like in a way, I think you could almost say that Asendavia nationalism existed as early as the 1100s in a sense. Maybe not completely, but in a sense, and then yeah, Asendavia kind of stopped expanding, at least on the continent, because I mean it had colonies later on, but it stopped expanding on the mainland during the 1200s when it made peace with Volokchia. Although in modern times there's kind of a nationalist push in some Asendavian circles to conquer eastern Lutaia, which has quite a few ethnic Asendavians. Because Lutaia is kind of very roughly 50-50 Volokchian and Asendavian, ethnically speaking.
Right.
And like, because Lutaia, prior to the Great War, had been part of Volokchia. And basically, yeah, because Volokchia had owned all of what is now Lutaia from the 1200s until the Great War, when, Volokchia had its revolution. So yeah, there's kind of a nationalist push to incorporate the Asendavian parts of Lutaya, and there might even be some fringe nationalist pushes in Asendavia to incorporate some of Volokchia itself, because even Volokchia itself has a good bit of ethnic Gliachians, which is the ethnic group that Asendavians are part of, because Volokchia is not a 50-50 split. I think it's more like a 60-40, I think, between Volokchian Vulpines and Volokchian humans, and basically all of the humans in Volokchia are basically, ethnically Gliachian, so there might be kind of a push from probably some radical people in Asendavia to incorporate Volokchia. But that's a lot more radical than, say, wanting to incorporate Eastern Lutaya. And keep in mind, Lutaya has, for at least since the early 2000s, basically been in a Somalia anarchy situation.
Oh, fun.
And also, Dylan has just asked a question that's related to Asendavia. Ian, when are we going to get a gritty Asendavian torture RP in the Rotantic labor camps?
Oh, yeah!
Well, I don't think it would be a whole RP thread by itself, but it's a definite idea for a post in Tales from Asendavia. It's a definite it's a definite post there.
I mean, I also say he'd have to also be careful, because, torture can, get gruesome quickly.
Yeah, I kind of have to toe the line.
What do you think of
what I describe and what I don't?
Question asked, what do you think of royalistic populism? I mean, it's an interesting idea. I mean, it very much is an idea that,
we should probably describe it first for the people who don't know what it is.
Right. Hold on, how do I think
I'm on the wiki page right now.
Okay, thank you.
So, yeah, I'm just going to read bits and pieces from the wiki page itself. So basically, royalistic populism is a monarchist philosophy that started in the 1600s, but which really gained popularity in the early 1900s. And it basically started in Norgesveld, kind of, modernized Norgesveldian politicians. Basically, constitutional monarchy, in a sense, but it's less democratic than, like, a full constitutional monarchy. Like, basically, royalistic populism kind of advocates for the king, or, monarch in general, as being a unifying force behind the nation and, like, actually having power, unlike the British monarch. Because, like, British monarch is, kind of a unifying cultural figure in a way. But with royalistic populism, the monarch there, again, still a unifying cultural figure, but one that actually has some power. Like, it's nowhere near absolute monarchy levels, but they actually do have some power.
I mean, one of the major political parties in Algeria has this ideology, royalistic populism. Pretty much just a, kind of like not so much a generic monarchist party, but a party that's like, maybe we should actually invest in the monarchy more than investing in this parliament thing, especially because, especially because we had a prime minister in Algeria. The prime minister, Matthias Barre, had a hand in the kidnapping of the king. So, like, maybe we shouldn't trust commoners with positions of power.
So, like, just to kind of give a simple, kind of clear answer for royalistic populism, kind of basically argues that having a monarch is central for the protection of democracy and political freedoms. That's kind of like the bare bones essence of it, in a sense. Ah, yes, and people in the live chat are talking about monarcho-communism, monarcho-femboys.
Femboys. Ah, yes. Oh, now replace monarcho with anarcho. Anarcho-communism, anarcho-femboys. There you go.
What about anarcho-monarchism? Anarcho-monarchism, femboyism. Anarcho-monarchist femboyism, yeah.
Monarcho-Megarianism and anarcho-Megarianism. Isn't that just like Algeria? Or not Algeria, isn't that just Megaria?
But yeah, also, royalistic populism just has a additional comment from Norgs in the live chat. He says it's very, like, anti-nationalist, really pushes for equality.
Well, that's going to be kind of conflicting in Algeria, but whatever.
And Sockdill has said, God save the Fem King.
God save the Fem King.
God on Earth save the Fem King. Adamar save the Fem King.
Zathos save the Fem King.
But
several people are typing. I always like watching the live chat where it's like always like 2 or 3 people typing, and then all of a sudden it's always like several people typing.
Yeah. But yeah, people ask, I don't know, maybe a few more questions, because we've been going almost an hour and a half, I think.
Yeah.
Really should wrap this up, like, not immediately, but probably soon.
Soonish. I mean, we could take like, we can do like 3 more questions.
Yeah,
I'm not gonna count Dylan's question as a question because, like, duh. Of course, I love nuggets.
Let's go with let's go with like 3 more actual questions, and we'll just answer the joke questions at will.
The joke questions at will. Actually, wait. Megaria did actually ask a real question.
Where exactly?
Would you be interested in having Shannon as a guest? Shannon on as a guest.
Now, do you mean that as in, like, just having yourself on as a guest, acting OC, or do you mean Shannon acting in character on here?
Because if we're going with in character, I would love to see that. I would love to do an in character like podcast episode.
Because I'm not sure how I exactly would do an in character podcast episode, but it is an interesting idea. Yeah, Meeg said he would come on the podcast in character as Shannon.
We could do we could interview in character characters.
That would be really interesting. So yeah, I would totally be down for doing that.
That would be very interesting.
Like, obviously, these interviews would not be canon, obviously, but it would still be fun as hell.
Oh yeah, no, like interview Barnott, Barbossa, but I just make eating noises.
Ah yes, Forensic Frankie.
Delicious. But yeah, no, I would love to do in character interviews, but they would essentially have to be very, very.
Okay, Norwich just asked a really good question.
Let me finish the thought real fast, and we'll answer the question.
Okay, yeah.
But if we're gonna do in character interviews, they're definitely gonna have to be non-canonical. Otherwise, there's no way we could get it to work.
Yeah. Okay, so Norgs just asked, where did fascism on Earth come from? And would it be more popular because, there was no real war against fascism? There wasn't really anything on Earth to make fascism so negatively viewed as it is in real life. There were no Nazis on roleplay Earth. At least as far as I'm aware.
Yeah, as far as I'm aware. Honestly, you have, like, I don't know, Bellisteria, which was a highly fascist nation, and actually drove it to basically commit several war crimes. Neither here nor there.
I know Fortuna has been fascist since the 90s.
Yeah. There's a rising fascist movement in Algeria. So I would for the popular part, I feel like it would be my lord.
What?
I have no idea if you guys just heard that. There was a huge thing of thunder outside.
No, I didn't hear that.
Okay, because like I heard it through my headphones. That's how loud it was.
Yeah, and then also there was Vistaraland. Wasn't Vistaraland ruled at least for a little bit by a clerical fascist party? Yeah, Soctil is okay.
But yeah, I really think that fascism would be popular or popular-ish on Earth as opposed to our Earth.
Yeah.
But
it's
where it comes
not as viewed negatively on Earth.
Right. But where it comes from is a more interesting question to ask because I don't know if there would be a specific start. Because fascism starts in Italy.
Yeah, fascism started in Italy in real life, and then it kind of spread.
And I mean, the other hard problem is that there's no good defining fascism. I mean, we have like the 14 points, but that's about it. There isn't like a good our Earth ideological, like, this is definitively fascism. So translating it into Earth is a little more difficult because how does it now play into the fact that there are multiple species and not just one race or one species?
Well, we're just gonna call it fascism for the simplicity of it, Norgs. Like, obviously fascism comes from a Latin word, but we haven't replaced other Latin words, so obviously we're just gonna still call it fascism.
Correct. An interesting idea for me is that I think it would depend on the nation. Like, the idea of fascism for Bellisteria comes from the rise of the Earth Science in the 1600s.
Yeah, because we really don't have any early examples of fascism on Earth, to be honest.
Right. So I guess it would be nation by nation by nation.
Yeah, it's pretty much really dependent on each nation, which was kind of the answer with the Enlightenment. That's really going to be the answer to a lot of things, because obviously you got, just so many different people RPing their own nations, and it's like, you can't get everything 100% coherent. Some of it is just going to be like that, where it's very nation dependent, and you can't get everything down, even as much as you might want to.
And I mean, the biggest thing too is that, like, it's not like Earth was heavily it's not like Earth, like every single nation on Earth was heavily colonized by somebody. There are a lot of nations who weren't colonized by someone. So that also kind of messes things up a little. No, Dylan, we're not going to retcon everybody's existence to being a colony. If that's going to happen, we're going to retcon that Morsabischlia was a colony of Algeria. Just
Don't
for the
make me get the spray bottle, Dylan. I'm gonna delete Thayrism.
No, we're not going to delete Thayrism. We're just going to delete Morsabischlia from the map.
Just delete Aurora as a whole, to be honest.
Yeah, you have.
Well, okay, Central Aurora, because Western Aurora, basically Axtell and West, are fine, and then Eastern Aurora, like the former Solovia, Australia, that area is fine. Basically, just Central Aurora can be deleted.
Yeah, just stainless.
Yeah, stainless.
Nah, Central Aurora ain't supreme.
Anyway,
are there any other
questions? Yeah.
Oh, here we go.
Here it is.
I think this is going to be our last question that we'll take before we just end it. Before we end this episode. Question. Kurdism. Would your nations, Algeria and Asendavia, look at it? I see speaking.
So let's see. It's a secular ideology that advocates republicanism ultranationalism, and militarism. So it's basically against everything that Asendavia stands for.
um. There's probably people in the Algerian Nationalist Party, which is literally just abbreviated to AMP. AMP. Um. Okay then. But I think the Algerian Nationalists, like, I think there are some people who are Kurdists in the AMP party. Maybe also in the conservative monarchist party, but not as much. Maybe not as extreme. But that's about it. I don't know if they're really going to be given their own dedicated platform.
Yeah, when it comes to Heirdism and Asendavia, again, it basically stands for everything against everything that Asendavia stands for. Because like Asendavia is like fucking heavily religious, very monarchical. It's like, and Heirdism is like basically
Everything not.
again. Yeah. Although I mean, it is ultranationalist, which Asendavia kind of is to a degree, and militarist, which, But yeah, Asendavia would definitely not like Heirdism at all. Like, I mean, maybe there would be some Heirdist people in Asendavia, like, I wouldn't doubt that, because there's always those people, you know. But it would definitely nowhere near mainstream. It would be so fringe in Asendavia.
Oh yeah, correct. No, it would have to.
Yeah. Because it's, again, literally everything against Asendavia.
Imperial Dylan asked, "What's the closest your nation has come to an extreme change of government / takeover?" And I mean, that's really easy for Algeria. 2020, when they went from being an absolute monarchy to a constitutional monarchy. But if we're not going to actually talk about changes in government, then I would say the kidnapping of Eldris and the attempt by Barbet to completely dissolve the power of the crown and put it in the parliament. There's also other events brewing, so like future role plays will explore that question more, but that's the best question I can give in the current moment for Algeria.
Yeah, when it comes to Asendavia for that one, well, the only one I can really think of right now would be the miners' rebellion in like 1915, which is what came to spawn Darakia, but basically, commies rose up in Asendavia. They got defeated in Tungrad because they tried to take the city of Tungrad. They failed, and they fled to Navaris. But at least that's the closest takeover of the country that I've world built. Well, that we have world built, because Sokdil was the one that really came up with that. I kind of just contributed a few ideas, but yeah, that's the closest thing I have so far, at least.
I think at this point, I think that is all that we're going to do for today's episode. Do you have any concluding thoughts, Ian?
Not really, but I just want to mention something Kryria said. Between Kryria and Darakia, I feel like all of Asendavia's trash runs to Navaris.
Well, I mean, it is a dumpster fire.
Because, I mean, first you got the Ursines, some Ursines migrating from Asendavia over into Navaris, which is how first of all, Radokans got, basically a language that, in the general Asendavian linguistic tree, and also how Vessi and Val got it. And also that's how Adamar came to be a god in the Lunarian pantheon. And then, of course, you got the actual Asendavians who migrated in 900s to Cryria, although Cryria itself got unified in the 1100s, if I remember right, and then you also got Endertopia, who basically came along with the Cryrians, but, formed Endertopias instead, which is a bit further east, but and then, of course, Dyrrakia, which fled Asendavia during the Great War into Navaris. But yeah, so all of Asendavia's trash just runs in. Dylan. The Imperialist Dylan says, IF. Condemnation of Asendavia for existing.
Yeah, for existing.
Yeah, for reference, IF stands for the International Forum, which is basically the UN equivalent for those who don't know.
Algeria thirds. No offense.
Yeah, fuck you.
Well, I mean, the comment before that from Sockdill said, I say we blame Asendavia for West Navaris.
Asendavia can be partially blamed for West Navaris, but only partially.
Oh yeah, so you missed the actually Norg is better, condemn MBE for existing.
Yeah, now see, I like that one a lot more.
Algeria definitely seconds that.
Oh, I third that.
Actually, final thought that's just kind of funny. So the other day, Ian, I made it canonical that the Alkari ambassador to Asendavia has never left Asendavia.
Oh, I remember reading that.
The reason being, and I kid you not, is that it is so cold in Asendavia, he does not want to leave the embassy.
It's not even that cold in Stromhurl. It's a temperate climate in Stromhurl. But I mean, that's what you get when you live your entire life in a tropical area.
Yeah, that's essentially the whole problem, is they live in...
Now, if that ambassador wanted real cold, they would have gone up to Kiev. Yes, there is an Asendavian city named Kiev. It's spelled differently, but pronounced the exact same.
You know, there's a part of me that's like, I wonder if I should just have the Algerian embassy there just as a joke. But yeah,
that would
no.
be funny. But yeah, all the embassies are in the capital city of Stromherod, which is in a decent climate.
Yeah, but yep. So the Alkari ambassador has never left.
But yeah, fun little world building. Oh, and also, Paige said something that I just really want to touch on really quickly. I'm not going to make this long.
All right, perfect.
Java Man Revival Project, yes or no? Yes.
Yes.
Is there a chicken Kiev? You know, I haven't thought about that, Sockdill, but I'm going to say yes. Chicken Kiev is from Asendavia. Fuck you, anyone else who wants to steal it. It is Asendavia. And it is spelled like that. Khiev, which is how the Asendavian city is spelled. So yes, Chicken Kiev, Asendavian.
Honestly, go for it. Alright, so at this point, I have been Shadow. And that's Ian.
I have been Ian. AKA Asendavia, AKA Helgraf, whatever the fuck you want to call me.
I feel like it's an event, Eventus 2.0 here. Eventus Magnanania.
I still have no idea how to pronounce that manganate. I have no idea how to fucking pronounce that.
God only knows.
Yeah.
And this has been Urthcast. I hope we catch you the next time that we record this episode. And stay tuned. This will be published at some point.
Yeah, hopefully soon, but who knows?
Who knows? Have a nice one, everybody.